Hello, this is your Watercolors 101 class. I'm going to give you the basic breakdown on how to use your watercolors the right way, and this is how you're going to need to use them for our class lessons and how you're going to be able to keep them in great shape, have them have a nice long life, and they will last you for many, many pieces of art. A big issue that people usually have with their watercolors is they run out of a certain color really, really fast. And you've probably seen that before. Well, I want to teach you about how to make these colors last a long time. So first, find yourself a good brush, find yourself a little plastic cup. Usually I fill mine about halfway, so if I spill, I've only spilled half as much as I need to. Make sure it's filled with clean water. The tray of your watercolors usually comes with a lid, and that has been siphoned off and divided into sections. You can feel these little walls right here. This is on purpose. This is so that you can actually make and create colors in different sections and use those in different parts of whatever your painting is. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to teach you about some ways that you can paint now. First way that people usually think they're supposed to paint with watercolors is they think they're supposed to dip their brush and they go right into a color. So there's a new color and they go swirl, swirl, swirl right in the middle of it. And then they get it really wet and that actually ends up scooping a ton of color onto the brush, and then they go directly onto the paper. If you have done that before, it is okay. It's not that it's the wrong thing to do. It's just, it's not going to make your watercolors last very long. So let's rewind a little bit. We dip in the water, we go to the oval, we get it nice and wet, we grab color, but then the next thing I'm going to do is not go to the paper, because the paper will pull all that color out and it'll only be in one tiny spot. And then you'll have to keep going back for more, and soon you run out. Here's what you do instead. Go over here to one of your rectangles. Dab your color there and use the wall of that little area space to brush off the extra paint. Then you saw I went into my water and I scooped like a little shovel or scooper some water. I didn't go in to clean my brush. Watch, I'll do it again. I just dip in, water goes into the brush. I'm not wishing it around. And then I brush the extra water off into that reservoir. I'm going to do that a few times. I'm just trying to get water into this little receptacle. Then I mix the water with the paint. Now I have a lot more paint here to use. And the more water you add, the lighter and more washed out the paint will get. Sometimes you can't tell until you add it to your paper, so you might have to add a little bit more paint to make it a richer color. But so you see I'm always kind of scraping off my brush. That's because I know color is up in that brush and I want to mix it with what's here on the tray. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of color right here and see how that looks. Is that how dark I wanted my color to be? Maybe I wanted it a little bit darker, so I can go get a tiny touch of color. See, look at how much I'm taking now. It's just a tiny little tip touch. And that's all I need to really mix this in and get some good color. And there we go. And that's how you do that. If you want it lighter, add more water to it. If you want it darker, another little tip touch is fine. But I want to show you now what it looks like when you do just go directly. And look at, see, I'm already running out because I ran out of water. That's as far as that got. If I did that same tip touch right there, I would be able to use this paint. Let's see, until I run out. How much is it going to be? Look how much space it's covering. So much more area than that little area right there. And I've only used about half of it. And I've used almost half my paper. Now, what this is called, you know, just painting. You can call it dry brushing if you want, because it's dry because the paper's dry, and I'm wiping my brush on the paper until my brush is dry. But there's another way to paint with watercolor that makes your colors go even further, if you can believe it. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the water, get it nice and clean. Okay, it's just water now. Water on the paper, what it does is it creates kind of a gloss onto the paper. It seals it, and now water is just sitting on top of the paper, ready to allow paint. Here we go, I'm gonna grab my paint, to blend over and over it like this. And you may think, well, that doesn't look much different than what you did before, but here's the fun part. You ready? I'm gonna go over here to another color. I had this ready before. And if I ever wanted to blend colors on paper, then having wet on wet, which is starting with wet paper and then going to color and adding more color, this is gonna allow my colors to really blend together well. And they're gonna bleed together. Let's see if you can see that. So that is the idea behind that. Okay, so now you've got a better idea about how to use your watercolors. You've learned some ways to make your color go really, really far so that you're not using up all your paint all at once. This is how we use watercolor. How do you clean it up though, right? You don't just want to close this lid on there and let that dry, unless you want to save this. If you're in the middle of a project, you can actually leave this open, let that dry completely, and then come back the next day, add some water to it, and pick up where you left off and keep going. How cool is that? Or if you're done with it and you just want to clean it for next time, dip your paper towel into that water right there, just a little bit. We're gonna rinse that out, we're gonna clean that out, and then I'm gonna take the dry part of my paper towel, get in there, get all up in those nooks and crannies, everybody, and then you've got yourself a nice clean tray and you're ready to work next time. Don't leave yourself a dirty tray. Don't do that to your future self. That's really annoying. Clean it off so that when your future self comes to the paint, you'll be like, oh, thanks. I got a nice clean area to work with. And that is how you work with your watercolors.